guys. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Bethany Jenkins, as that fancy video set up there. I live in New York City, where I run the vocational development at the King's College, and I also do faith and work for the Gospel Coalition. I'm an editor there. So I'm excited to talk to you guys today about creative service or work. I want to talk to you guys about the biggest creative problem that I think you will face, or one of the biggest creative problems I think you'll face in your life, which is how to figure out what you're going to do. What is going to be your career? I've done this talk before, but I usually have done it with college students, and so I thought maybe it wouldn't be relevant to you all since you're in high school, but I've actually come to find out that a lot of people in high school are now thinking about their careers. When I was in high school, I didn't think about much other than playing basketball and playing with my friends, shoot some hoops. And I actually didn't think about my career much in college. I didn't do one internship in college, but times have changed. I read a study yesterday that showed that almost half of high school students are seeking internships or volunteer experiences to make themselves competitive for college admissions, college internships, and full-time jobs. So I do not envy you all, because you are now front-loading this question now into your teenage years that I didn't deal with until I was in my 20s. So you're having to grow up a lot faster than I had to grow up. But today, this problem, oftentimes when you don't know the answer to the question, what do you want to do for your work, the question is, well, what are you passionate about? And today I want to talk to you about why that question actually doesn't make sense. So I call the passion mindset, this mindset of that way, we want to first think about what we're passionate about and then find a job afterwards that matches that. There's a lot of things wrong with that. And I want to say that it's not wrong to think about what you're passionate about, but the question, when you first figure out what you're passionate about and then you figure out the job, that's a faulty mindset. I want to give you guys 7 reasons why that's a faulty mindset. First, we want the wrong things and we want the right things for the wrong reasons. So Jeremiah tells us that our hearts are deceptive above all who can understand them, and Augustine tells us that we have disordered loves. I know I'm not the only one in the room who has wanted the wrong things, or I've wanted the right things, but I wanted them for the wrong reasons. And so when we say that passion is the first metric, this is the problem, because we actually don't always have great passions. Second, there is no evidence that passions are pre-existing. So there is no evidence that you were born with some mysterious passion that if only, oh my gosh, if you just figured it out, then you'll actually get into the right job. There's no evidence. Most of you are probably going to be vocationally really nimble. I mean, even right now, you're probably thinking in your heads, I'm a student, I'm a sibling, I'm a child, I'm a friend, I'm a conference attendee. There's so many things you are that to reduce the question of what are you passionate about to one metric is actually pretty faulty. And the third reason is actually very similar. It's too much emphasis on occupation versus vocation. All of those things I just mentioned are vocation. They're all things that you will be in your life. One day you will be other things too. And your job title will be one thing that you will be. But it's not, by far, not the only thing. When I asked my dad at one point if he felt like he was doing his passion, he's been a lawyer now for about 20 years. He's been such a great lawyer and such a great dad that 2 of us out of 3 of us have our law degrees. Neither one of us use them. I have a law degree, don't use it. My brother does too. But he said to me, Bethany, law is not my passion. I love doing missions work, and it's just not his job. But he loves doing his work, it's just not his passion. That language is it occupies too much time. There's also no evidence, number 4, there's no evidence that if you love something, you'll love it as a job. So I love running, love it. I don't know how many of you guys are running cross country, but yeah. I'm right now training for a marathon. I need to run 20 miles on Thursday. I love running, but no one would pay me for it. That doesn't mean I don't do it, it just means I have a hobby. And hobbies are great, but it doesn't mean you have to do it as your job. No one would pay me for running. My miles are like 9.5 a minute. Number 5, it's anxiety-filled and there's too much pressure. 90% of the conversations I talk about with students is actually dealing with managing their fear. So when you decide to say that passion is going to be front-loaded, it's actually a lot of pressure to figure out what that mysterious passion is before you find that job, and which is a lot of anxiety. Number 6, it's self-centered. It's all about you and what the world can offer you. So the difference between the mindset of what gives me passion and how can I serve you are two different mindsets, and we're going to talk about that a lot more actually. But it's when you say, what is my passion, it's what's going to make me happy, not how can I work to make somebody else happy. The last thing is, and this is true, entry-level jobs are not actually that challenging or filled with autonomy. So I'll meet with students and they'll say, this is my dream job. And I think, wow, that is sad that your dream job you're going to get at 22. You're actually going to live your life and you're going to grow in your career and you're going to get better and better at it. And it's going to become more of a job that you like. But your first job, you're more likely going to be asked to change the water cooler than the world. My first job, right after college, I came here to DC and I worked as an intern on Capitol Hill for my hometown congressman and wasn't asked to do much. And that was okay because I didn't know much. But nobody was asking me to change the world. I was more running papers and picking up mail and doing these things and learning and keeping my eyes open. So this is why this passion mindset is not great. But instead of leaving you there, I actually want to give you a different mindset. And I used to call this the craftsman mindset, so I think in your booklet you're going to have that question, but I've actually developed it a little bit more because craftsman mindset, in the way I phrased it, didn't actually talk about our motivations. So instead I talk about the disciples mindset. In order to do that, we're going to talk about what it means to love, because I think work, as we saw in the ungiving tree, it's one of the best ways that we can love our neighbors. So if the first commandment is to love the Lord your God, the second is to love your neighbor as yourself, work is a great way that we do that, because we meet so many different kinds of people at work. So we're going to turn actually to John 13. I don't know if any of you guys have your Bibles. This will be a little mini teaching time. And we're going to go to the upper room. Because here's Jesus. I don't know if y'all are familiar with the upper room. It's John 13. And I'm going to read from 4 to 17. And in John 13, this is the last training session of Jesus where he is talking to his disciples. And it's before they're going to go out into the world and they're going to be his representatives. So if you think about how do I capture in a nutshell the most important things that I need to tell the disciples before I'm gone, you're going to go to the upper room. And this is what he has to say. John 13, 4 through 17. He laid aside his outer garments and taking a towel tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, do you wash my feet?" Jesus answered him, "What I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand." Peter said to him, "You shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered him, "If I do not wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "The one who has bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you." For he knew he was going to betray him, and that was why he said, "Not all of you are clean." When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, "Do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If then your Lord and teacher have washed your feet, you ought also to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you also should do just as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are them if you do them. Blessed are you if you do them." So I'm going to talk about 3 marks of a disciple's mindset that's different than the passion mindset. 1 is a disciple loves people. 2, a disciple pursues faithfulness. And 3, a disciple has a bias toward action. So 1, a disciple loves people. When you guys get into the world, one thing you're going to discover is 70 to 80% of jobs or internships are not posted anywhere. They're hidden. It's called the hidden job market. So the question becomes, and by the way, when you submit your resume to like a conglomerate or like a LinkedIn type thing, every resume gets looked at for an average of 6 seconds. So you work super hard on a resume and it gets looked at for 6 seconds. The way to get beyond that is actually to build relationships. That's how you get people to look at your resume longer, and it's how you get access to that 70 to 80% of the hidden job market. Because most jobs go to people who they know, their friends, or their acquaintances. And so once you realize how important getting to know people is, as soon as your brain recognizes that, another thing kicks in, the temptation to use people. So once we know how important people are to what we want and need, we actually start to think of them as transactional people who will get us what we want. We end up calling people contacts instead of friends, and we think of them just for how much they can give us. I go to Redeemer Presbyterian in New York City. My pastor, Tim Keller, has been preaching on this passage, and one of the things he said in a recent sermon is he said that all of us are little bundles of need walking around needing things. We need approval, we need power, we need comfort, ease, and so we're constantly looking for people who can actually feed that need. When someone has friends, we like them because if they're popular, we feel popular. If somebody has a lot of achievements, we like them because if they're successful, we feel successful. And we say things to them like, I love you because of how you make me feel. That is not love. That is what C.S. Lewis calls hunger. And this is what he writes. Even in human life, we have seen the passion to dominate, almost to digest one's fellow, to make his whole intellectual and emotional life merely an extension of one's own. On earth, this desire is often called love. In hell, I feign they recognize it as hunger. And so what happens is once we realize this person can help us get a job, we start to devour them. We become cannibals. They become useful only as much as they can give us. They cease to have the image of God that we've heard about, and they become just transactional things that we want to use. That's the danger of recognizing how important people are for the career exploration, and then when we want to use them. But this passage, I love this passage because it teaches us that love is washing other people's feet. Love is serving people. It is not saying, what can you give me? It's saying, what can I give you? It feels like death because it's subordinating our interests to their interests. It's basically saying that I'm not going to tell everything that I want and need. I'm going to listen to them. But it actually leads to life. So how does this approach change your job search? You start to ask people what their dreams and hopes and aspirations are. You don't start off with yours telling you this is what I want to be and this is what I want to become. You talk to professionals out in the working world and you say, what did you do? Tell me about your story. What were your dreams and aspirations? And ironically enough, when they start telling you what they've done, you actually can craft your response better. You can say, I can help you with that. Oh, you said you know in your job you need this? I can help you do that because I've learned how to do X, Y, and Z. It's actually, it shifts radically from, listen to me, here's my resume, let me tell you everything I can do, to how can I help you? Total shift in career. So a disciple loves people. A disciple washes people's feet. The second thing that a disciple does is pursue faithfulness. The question of in fact, at the beginning of this talk, I said, what do you want to do? And I almost said the question I almost forbid my students from saying, which is, what do I want to do for the rest of my life? I think that is not a great question. How many of you guys have asked that question before or have been asked that question? Almost all of you. Don't answer it and stop asking it. It's a ridiculous question. Millennials are on average changing jobs every 1 year and 8 months. So this idea of what am I going to do the rest of my life actually doesn't make any sense anymore. It used to be that people stayed in one job and they had that for many years. That is not the case anymore. You're probably going to pivot a lot and you're going to change and you're going to discover new things about yourself, and that's okay. Your jobs cannot be perfectly planned. You are not omniscient. God is omniscient. That is an incommunicable attribute of God. The things he's given you are wisdom and discernment, and that's sufficient, but he has not told you everything that's going to be in the future. That's him alone. When I've done this before, I've asked the question, I'll give you a little bit of my background, because I didn't really. When I first graduated college, I moved to DC, and I worked in Congress for 4 years for 2 different members of Congress. Then I went to work for President Bush at the White House, at the State Department as a presidential appointee. I then went to the New York Stock Exchange and I worked in finance and communications, and then I went to Columbia Law School, did law, and I've been in faith-based nonprofits for the past 5 years between Gospel Coalition and Kings. And if I had to bet, my bet is you would never guess what my major was. Spanish and International Studies. And I say that because 27% of people do something related to their major. 27%. You are not married to your major. When you get into college and you choose what major you're going to be, choose something that is intellectually interesting to you, that you're curious about. You do not have to connect your major with your career. Your parents might kill me for saying that, but it's true. 27%. Instead, learn to develop deep thinking and figuring out how to solve problems, because that will translate to any career you do. Your major will not do that. I have a major in Spanish and International Studies. I have a law degree, and I use all of that thinking in a lot of ways, but it's not something I'm doing every day. And I love my life, so you can too. 27%. Genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration, Thomas Edison said. What matters is not what you're passionate about when you start, it's actually what happens when you start going. The hard work this is where the craftsman mindset comes in. The hard work that you decide to apply once you get there, the faithfulness in small things, that's actually what matters. So faithfulness looks like two things. One, it's faithfulness on working unto him, and the other one is faithfulness praying unto him. So both times we have our focus is on him. In that passage in John, he says, I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. So he's saying, look at me. I'm the focus, actually. Of your faithfulness, I'm the focus. And we have faithfulness, we work under him. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord, not men, Paul tells us. Jesus says, one who is faithful in a little is faithful in much. When you do deep work, competence, getting better at it, that leads to more autonomy and more control. And ironically, that leads you to work that you love. The qualities that give people who like their work generally have autonomy over it, they have control over it, and they have ability to be somehow creative with it. So but you don't have that at the beginning. You're not going to get a lot of autonomy. So you want to build that in slowly, like a craftsman or like a disciple. When I did this talk with a small group of students at King's, someone said to me, well, Bethany, does that mean that passion doesn't matter and it's irrelevant? I have a real passion, as some of you guys might, for anti-sex trafficking. She was really interested in international justice mission. And I imagine that some of you guys have those similar passions. I did. In fact, I love IJM. When I was in law school, I talked to them a lot about possibly working with them. And I said, actually, that's not what I'm saying. I think it's great for you guys to have hearts that care about other people. That's actually loving other people. But I said to her two things. One, don't assume that a cause that you love, you're going to do it as a job. You don't have to do it as a job. Like I said before, you can have a hobby. I love IJM, and I'm actually involved in it, even though it's not my paid work. There's unpaid work, volunteerism, that you will do throughout your life, hopefully. And you will give your life and heart to a lot of that. So don't assume it's going to be your job. That doesn't mean it can't be, but don't assume it will be. And the other thing I said to her is, even if you want to go work at IJM or work at a cause, they actually need skills to help them get where they're going. So we had Charity Water, Scott Harrison, come to King's College last year, and one of the things that he was asked about, Charity Water basically brings clean water to areas that don't have it. And one of the questions that he talked about was basically this question of, I'm really passionate about charity water. And he basically said that it's great that you're interested in charity water, but that's actually not the hard thing to find. The passion part is not the hard thing to find. What's really hard to find is people who have the skills that help us take the work further. So they wanted people who were good at marketing, who were good at law, who were good at fundraising, like hard skills that actually helped that cause get where they were. So that's what I want you guys to think about. Be a disciple and pursue those little small faithfulnesses to help to help causes get better. And the other thing is pursue faithfulness by praying unto him. I'm just going to read this great quote from a pastor, Kevin DeYoung, who was making a decision about whether to go to a different church that he was at, or to stay at the church that he was already at. And this is what he prayed. about decision making. I prayed a lot about the decision, but I didn't ask God to tell me what to do. So what did I pray for? I prayed that God would make me honest in my interviews. I prayed that I would see a true picture of this church and that they would see a true picture of me. I prayed mostly that my heart would be right and that I wouldn't be motivated by pride, either to stay because it was a big church or to move because I could be senior pastor. I prayed that I wouldn't make a decision based on fear, what if I fail, or pleasing people, will I let down the search committee. I prayed that I would make a decision based on faith, hope, and love. That's a great prayer to pray, as even you guys are making decisions about colleges. There's not like a right or wrong thing, like this college or this college. But there are wise and foolish motivations for making those decisions. And that's what he's getting at. Lord, give me knowledge, accurate knowledge about what's going on here. Lord, help me not to make a decision based on fear or pride. Those are things that actually affect, that's how the disciple thinks of his heart as the most important aspect of who he is. What is my motivation? Why am I making certain decisions? That is really key as you make any decisions, not just your career decisions. Finally, a disciple has a bias towards action. When passion is superficial, you have interests. When passion is real, you have demonstrated interests. So I'll have students come to me and say, I'm really passionate about, and I'm going to use all my illustrations will be running because I love it. I'm really passionate about running. And I'll say, great, what races have you run? I don't know, I just like to run. That's a superficial passion. Anybody who has a real passion, they will have an answer to the question. Oh, I ran the DC Marathon. Oh, I ran the 5K. Like when you actually are really interested in something, you've actually done something. And that's what a disciple does. There's a bias towards action that actually they live out what they believe and they care about. And of course we see that in Christ, right? We have him washing their feet. I'm not just going to say I love you, I'm going to show you how I do it. I'm going to wash your feet, it was so offensive washing the feet that Jewish slaves couldn't even be commanded to do it. And here is the King of Glory who lived in the heavens, who stooped down to wash feet. That's love. Unlike God, though, we're not omniscient, as I said earlier, so we sometimes have to test out our ideas before we make big jumps. At the King's College, I call this prototyping. So we have design thinking, just how Nike would design a shoe. We apply the same thinking to how a student would basically design their career and their life. My mentor, Dave Evans, is at Stanford, and he is the one who kind of invented this idea. And one of the things he says is there is no job charming. Like, do not think that there's a dream job out there. You actually need to test out things and get better at learning about it. So prototypes is basically deciding to commit to do something without committing too soon to everything. And so a prototype might be an internship where you're testing it out a little. Prototypes are cheap, fast, and informative. So you might do an internship. You might do an informational interview where you just listen to a professional telling them what you're doing. You do these even when you're college searching, right? If you're looking at colleges, you're probably going to go there for a day and see what it's like. You might sit in a classroom. You might talk to somebody who's been to that college. Those are all prototypes. You're trying to figure out, I'm putting myself in that position. How can I imagine myself here? Do the same thing when you figure out a career. It's so easy. You want to go and you want to go to the marketplace. You want to go to the office, see what it's like. So that's what you do. I always say your courses are your classroom, but the world is your lab. Go out and test your ideas. See if they hold up. And my last point is just really this. So we've talked about a disciple loves people, pursues faithfulness, and has a bias towards action. But the question is, without the gospel, we have no power to obey these ethical commands of Christ. So where do we get the power to follow this disciple's mindset? If we go back to the upper room, to the washing of the disciples' feet, we know that days later, hours later, Jesus walks the Via Dolorosa, and he dies. Isaiah tells us he was marred beyond recognition. He was spit upon, mocked. And often we call this the Passion of Christ, his suffering. And why do we call it that? What is that passion he was after? And I want you guys to see that passion he was after, what he loved so deeply, was you. And so we see in Isaiah, he says, when his soul makes an offering for guilt, he shall see his offspring. That's you. Out of the anguish of his soul, he shall see and be satisfied. In Hebrews 12:2, it says, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame. That joy is you. And once you start to see that the passion of Christ was actually driven by a passion, a suffering that he had for you, then he can become your passion. And through him becoming your passion, you actually can reinvent how you approach all of life as a disciple. So when you see that he loved you, not for what you offered him, but because he loved you. When you see that he pursued faithfulness, even obedience to the cross, then you see how we can pursue faithfulness. And when we see that he had a bias towards action to the point that he actually died and rose again, then you can see his passion for you. And then he can become your passion. Out of the overflow of your heart, really deeply seating his passion in your heart, you actually can pursue a disciple's mindset for all of life. Thank you guys for having me this morning.